So today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm honored to have Alan Zundel with me, who is a former political science professor and who is working on starting a political party focused on economic rights. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. We've talked a few times before, through email and through Skype, or not Skype, Zoom. But today we're recording it and we're a bit more focused on a specific question. And I think you can speak to this a lot given your background. And I'm just looking forward to the conversation, looking forward to learn what I can.
Okay. Your mention of Skype ages you.
Well, I'm only 31, but yeah. Yeah, so the fundamental question that I think we kind of agreed on is this question of if democracy as an idea is compatible with extreme wealth, with billionaires or corporations that have extreme levels of power, if those two concepts are mutually exclusive or if they can be reconciled in any way. But kind of what I would like to do from the outset is define our terms a little bit of what specifically we're talking about. What do we mean by democracy? Because I mean, people have different ideas of what democracy even is. And what do we
True.
mean by extreme wealth? Is that just people that make, six figures? Is that people that, make seven, eight? What are we talking about here? So, from your perspective, could you define our terms a little bit?
Okay, you're going to throw me a hard one right
Ball,
away.
ball in your court. Yeah.
Okay. In a general sense, democracy means that ordinary people, citizens, have control of their government.
Okay.
How that could be done is varies, and how great an extent they have control of the government could vary, because obviously, if you have any governmental system in which people are put into office, they're going to have more power than your average citizen. So
Mm,
it's really a question of how accountable you can make people like that to the citizens, to the ordinary citizens. So that's a pretty general definition, and then democracy comes in varying forms. Um, Wealth, what would be extreme? I don't know that I would give it a specific cutoff point, but I would say definitely we're in that situation.
yeah.
There, there's measures of inequality, like there's something called a Gini coefficient that measures the distance between the poor and the wealthy, or
Mhm.
maybe it's between the average and the wealthy. I forget, but there are measures of inequality, and I think the United States has always been toward the unequal end compared to other what we generally call industrial democracies, although they're no longer that industrial based or that democratic if they ever were.
Right. So if we're going to work from those terms, what is oligarchy? Because that's another term that we hear thrown around a lot lately. And are we headed that direction? Are we already there? Could you speak to
I
that?
think we're much closer to oligarchy than to democracy. And it's interesting that we're using these particular terms in this context because long time ago, like about 2,500 years ago, Aristotle actually wrote about this stuff. And of course, the words democracy and oligarchy both come from Greek.
Mhm.
And Aristotle was a Greek. He was a philosopher, and he studied a bunch of different government systems around the world that he knew of, and compared their way they organize things. And they use words like democracy and oligarchy. So
Mhm.
democracy actually means power in the hands of the crassy part is kind of power, and the demos part is people that have a very small piece of property. So it's like the people who don't have much having power in the political system. And oligarchy means garchy means the people who are have power. It's a different form of the word.
Mhm.
And the ol means few. So it means a very few people actually hold the power.
Yeah, I was not aware of the actual like roots of those either of those words, honestly.
The reason I bring up Aristotle is because he actually discussed the question of what the best form of government was. And he
Mhm.
considered oligarchy and he considered democracy, and he found them, at least in the ways he understood them, as wanting, as lacking. So he said the best thing was something that's in between, that if you had a fairly equal citizenship in terms of wealth and income, then they could have fairly equal power. But as soon as you got some people too rich and some people too poor. There's going to be conflict between them,
Mhm.
and either one is going to oppress the other in one way or another. Like if the poor take over, they'll take away all the wealth from those who worked hard to get it. He had enough wealth to believe that everybody gets their wealth legitimately. And on the other end, if you have an oligarchy in power, they're going to oppress people and use that power to exploit them economically and politically.
Hmm. Yeah, I might disagree with that framing a bit on the rich people necessarily just working hard where they're at.
Well, yeah, complain to Aristotle, not me.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we at on that scale? Like, and what, I guess, what specifically would you point to as the key signs that we are closer to oligarchy at this point than democracy? Are there like some key things?
I would say that from the adoption of the American Constitution, we've never been fully a democracy.
Hmm.
It was actually a more, they used the term conservative, but it's not in the sense that we know it today. It was a conservative revolution in that after the American Revolution, a lot of people who fought in the war, ordinary people, felt like they deserved political power. But
Hmm.
then the folks who had some wealth became nervous about this. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of conflict over taxes or support or who paid what and whether people deserved more than they had. And the Constitution was supposed to put kind of it was really an Aristotelian kind of framework that we're going to try to protect property rights, but also give people some rights to elect their representatives. So
Right.
it's never been fully a democracy. It's always been something that tried to put restrictions on people's ability to decide what the government could do in favor of protecting wealth. And I would say today, all you have to do is look at the people who are in the national government, especially the US Senate, how much money they have compared to you or I. Quite a bit. So it's the same in the House of Representatives. There's a little more spread there, but almost everybody there, either they have a lot of wealth or they have access to people and institutions that have wealth to help them get into office and stay into office. And
Hmm.
our system does not give a lot of opportunities for people to break through if they don't have that kind of financial backing.
Hmm.
We're really restricted. We can vote for whoever we want, but because the way the voting system is set up, it's almost always going to be a Democrat or Republican. And
Right.
both those parties are dominated by financial interests.
Yeah. I mean, corporations seem to run our politicians by and large at this point.
They do.
I always joke around and say they should be like the NASCAR drivers and just have all the corporations like
Yeah.
the stickers or whatever, sewn into
The
their uniform.
politicians, yeah.
Yeah. No, okay, so I guess if we go back, people have like maybe this concept is just entirely wrong from the outset, but people have an idea that there was sort of an idealized American past that maybe things weren't great for different reasons, but that corporations and like the billionaire class didn't always have such a stranglehold on our system of governance. I mean, from the outset, it was basically white guys that own property that could vote and get into office. So I would say that we were never true democracy in that sense, and that's what you already said. But like, is there something novel about where we're at now versus times past, and what kind of got us to this place where we're at
Yeah.
right
Well, it depends on how far back you go. Throughout American history, there's always been more democratic efforts to expand the vote and to make it easier for people to vote and to use the power of the government to benefit people more economically. And on the other side, there's been resistance to that, right? So this has always been a back and forth where one side will kind of push things in their direction and then the other side pushes back.
now?
But if you look at it today, what people are usually looking back at is something that's more recent in history, the late 1950s, early 1960s. This is because of the New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt in the 30s. With the Great Depression, which was such an economic disaster, there was a need for a change in the political system. And
Mhm.
even though Franklin Roosevelt was a rich person, he saw the need for a change and he accepted a lot of changes that gave us a somewhat more equal society. And there was pushback from rich people, but it became accepted and they saw that they were continuing to make money and make profits up until about the 1970s. And when that happened, the forces of wealth started to push back against all of the New Deal programs. They
Hmm.
started to make it harder to unionize. They kept trying to restrict like welfare benefits and unemployment benefits and give more power to corporations and wealth. So we've seen the eroding of all these types of things that supposedly gave us the relatively equal kind of economic situation we had. I say relative because it's relative to, say, the 1920s before the big crash and today after these several decades of growing inequality.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I always kind of, and I speak as a layperson. I don't have the training you do in political science or anything like that. But I've kind of in my own private study and just kind of researching what I have, it seems like the 1940s and 50s with the New Deal era, that kind of birthed what people kind of view as sort of the American dream era where it became possible to, own the house off of a single income and, be able to go on vacations and do all just the normal or things we think of normal now.
Mhm.
And then it was during the 1970s and then especially 1980s with the Reaganomics, era sort of that things really started changing. Is that a pretty accurate timeline?
I would say so. And the difference between the right and left today is really in their story of why it changed.
Okay. Could you tease that out a bit more? What do you
Yeah.
mean?
On the left, they're saying the corporations pushed back and started unraveling what we had built. And on the right, they said those kind of programs led to the economic problems of the 1970s, especially high inflation and unemployment. We had a period of economic turbulence in the 70s, and each side was claiming that the other side really had caused it. So the right
Okay.
was saying all these reforms just made things not work anymore. And we needed to start to unravel some of them. We went too far, in other words, went too far with labor rights, went too far with welfare benefits, we went too far with environmental regulations and other regulations. And so we needed to open things up to more competition. Then the economy could grow. Whereas on the left, they're saying, no, things were working well for ordinary people. And it's only when you guys started to unravel everything that things went wrong. So it depends on what you focus on and the kind of story you tell about it, where
Mhm.
you're going to land on the political map or who you believe.
So if you, I'm asking your opinion, if you step back and try to be as unbiased as possible and examine it from, I mean, we all have biases and we all approach information with those biases, but as neutrally as you can, do either side have more credence to sort of the story they tell? Is it somewhere in the middle what actually happened? Kind of what's your take on that?
Well, I'm not neutral. I'm
Yeah.
on the left um, because we do have different values, but history is history.
Hmm.
And I look back on history and I've read quite a bit about it and due to my training, subjected it to questions. And what I see is that capitalism is the driving force in inequality.
Hmm.
It's when you have government that pushes back against the effects of capitalism that things can become a little more equal. But then capitalism, just as a system, not necessarily because there's villains, but just as a system, it's going to put pressure against those constraints.
Hmm.
And eventually, either you're going to have to do something to change capitalism at the roots of it, or you're going to have to allow it to just burst every restraint and become a who knows what. So it's I don't regard myself as neutral on this at all.
Okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, that's fine. I don't regard myself as neutral. I try to step back sometimes and be neutral, but I know that no matter what, I have a framework and I have priorities, and it's like human flourishing and dignity and not corporations making
I
us.
find it better just to put it out there instead of
Yeah, no, no, it's fair
because
enough.
then people are going to accuse you, that's not neutral. That's all biased.
And that's a point I've made in videos I've done before. And the more I research, the more it seems is like you can have like maybe individual billionaires or individual very, very wealthy people, or I don't know about corporations, but individuals that might be decent human beings and be philanthropists and all those things. But those people still benefit from a system designed to uphold and propagate people like them. And so we're not trying to like demonize every single individual. This is more of a systemic critique of capitalism as a
Yeah.
whole and from the type of situations we're facing now. And that's what like the system actually produces.
That's where I disagree with the rhetoric of somebody like Bernie Sanders, who, in a lot of ways, I would support some of his ideas. But whenever he talks about the greed of billionaires, I think he's missing the point. He's making it into a question of virtue and vice rather than the whole system pushes people into you have to seek a profit or your business goes by the wayside. And the ways to seek a profit are sometimes by finding a good market and producing a better product, but maybe even more often, it's by putting the costs on somebody else, reducing the labor's benefits and salary, and degrading the environment, removing jobs from thriving communities and just leaving them desolate, cheating people, making people dependent upon you're giving them false promises, or like the insurance market, you find you can't escape from it anymore, and
Mhm.
they're all jacking up their prices. So I think the whole system, because it's premised on trying to make money for people who have invested, everybody's caught up in it. If you
Yeah,
have any money, it's hard to find a place to invest it that's not going to be seeking profits at any cost. If you're a worker, you're going to find yourself caught up in a system in which you have to work for somebody who's not interested in your welfare. They're interested in how you can help make a profit. And so that drive to make profits is what keeps the whole system running.
I see that. I mean, capitalism kind of is a systemic problem and is driving us towards a specific goal. Is there a way to balance? Because, I mean, essentially, like your kind of democratic socialists, a lot of them land in a position of trying to put limitations and reforms around capitalism and just make it like less destructive to the average person. Do you think that balance could potentially be reached, or there could be some sort of happy medium? Or do you think that systemically it is so corrosive to human flourishing and well-being that the system itself just entirely needs to be replaced? And if it needs to be replaced, what would we replace it with?
Well, that's a big question with
Just
multiple
asking you
parts. Yeah.
to answer the biggest question in our society today. No big deal.
Okay. So the first question is whether we can just find a balance between government restrictions on capitalism and capitalism also being present. I think you can find temporary balances
Hmm.
like they did in the 30s and 40s, but I think because anytime it's reducing profits, businesses are going to have the incentive to either push back or to escape the
Hmm.
system. By escape, I mean going to other countries and abandoning the US. I don't think it can be a permanent ceasefire between the well being of citizens and capitalism. That's my opinion. I do think that people get afraid of the idea that if you're going to replace socialism, we're going to end up like the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
But I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to envision something beyond capitalism when we see where capitalism is taking us. I
Yeah.
don't think it's really clear to people as much as it will be in the near future. But I think more and more people are saying, hey, no matter which party we turn to, it seems like our living situation is getting worse.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something behind this. I don't know how many people will get that, how fast, if it'll be in time. But I do think the main thing in capitalism that needs to change is you don't have corporations that are structured in a way that they're controlled by the investors. They have to be controlled by the workers. That's an old socialist idea. The problem was they made the government a go-between between the workers and the control of the economy. And then the government took on a life of its own.
So you would advocate for worker-led change rather than state
Well, worker controlled businesses,
over state
essentially.
mandates or
Well, the role of the government would be just to outlaw corporations that were set up for investors and make it
okay.
possible for workers to organize
I mean, I
their
agree
uh,
with that.
their businesses.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great to me. But I also don't invest in.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of questions this raises about exactly how that would be structured and how you go about it and how we can get from here to there. But at this point, I think what we really need is not a blueprint, but a vision. Like, how can we think of this as being different than what we've been exposed to in the past, either in our capitalist societies or in the so-called socialist societies? The things we see wrong with them, can we envision a way of having something that's different? I think that's the key question. Can you present a vision to people that they see as appealing and realistic?
And just anecdotally, a lot of people aren't there yet. From what my
Yeah.
interactions with people is you're either a capitalist or you're a commie that wants to, bring about the second Stalin and make sure millions of people die of starvation. Like there's no other option in a lot of people's minds. And obviously, I think we both disagree that those are the only two options out there. Um,
I would hope so.
yeah, I sure would hope so because both those outcomes suck. I don't like either one of them.
I agree with you on that. And you got to remember that people with wealth, there's a lot of them who want to perpetuate the system for their own benefit or because they believe in it. And they have a lot of means of propaganda. Corporations
Yep.
control the media. Corporations control, book publishing. Corporations control filmmaking, and they're going to be very cautious about allowing anything to emerge from the system that challenges the premises that people have learned since they were children. Why capitalism is good, why we are a democracy, all that stuff. When you start, it's almost like you're raised a Christian. All of a sudden, you ask questions about the Bible. It's like you're raised in this society. If you ask a question, why does it have to be this way? It's a taboo question.
It truly is, but because okay, up until about 3 years ago, I would have just considered myself like a classic, like liberal, like vote blue no matter who kind of individual. And it was only in running my own business and I saw how difficult it was to start a business, but then I saw on a micro level how easy it was to exert control over workers that I employed and like how much profit I could make in a night versus how little I could get away with paying them, even though I would like as a small business pay them way better than like even big corporations pay them. I could see in a microcosm sort of the power I could exert over people, and then you just scale that to like our society and capitalism at large. And that's kind of like the first thread that was pulled for me as an individual to start to question that system. Um, I don't even know where I was going with that, but
That's a good point because you feel the pressure. Even if you want to do a business that's beneficial to your workers, you find the pressures pushing you in another direction. Like you can't pay too far above market wages without detriment to your prices, say.
right.
So there's restrictions on what you can do based on the fact that it's a market economy, and most of your competitors are organized in a way that's exploitative.
What do you organize society around instead of capital, instead of market, instead of what is that organizing principle that can make a society cohesive?
Let's start back with workers' control. It, market is not a problem if you're competing with businesses that are similar to your own,
Hmm.
that have the same kind of worker internal dynamics. And I think eventually, and this is kind of a projection without, it's just how I imagine the future could be. Markets are essentially negotiations,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
You're negotiating on prices. There's no reason, if everybody feels they have enough, that people can't start negotiating in a way that's mutually beneficial rather than trying to get an advantage over the other person.
Hmm. Yeah, so I've been reading more and more on like communitarian concepts. So
Hmm.
keeping markets small and local, and to where all of the wealth, whatever system that is, sort of stays within the local community. Do you find any merit in those arguments and those schools of thoughts? Does that have any
Yeah.
overlap with what you're kind of proposing?
Yeah, I was exposed to those ideas a couple decades ago. They've been around. It's because people see the individualism in the United States as kind of an economic and also a social problem.
Hmm.
You're forced to think of yourself first, which means that our all of our places where we socialize and feel a sense of community are eroding. So
Yeah.
the communitarian vision was, let's find ways to bring back other types of social institutions. I'd say right now, the main place that people find some sense of community other than their workplace, if they have a good union in particular, but would be in churches and religious institutions. But political parties, it's hard to find a lot of communal support as they used to be back in the old days. Parties used to be very different.
Hmm.
Now they're run mostly by professionals and money. Back then, it used to be actually, especially in the Democratic Party, a lot of volunteers and a lot of people, neighbors coming together. Not that the Republicans haven't had that as well, but both parties really seem to have been taken over by professionals who cost a lot of money, so they have to raise a lot of money.
And do you think that takeover is coordinated? And I don't mean like coordinated in like some conspiratorial sense. I mean just due to the same pressures we're talking about people with extreme wealth or corporations being able to exude large amounts of power over society as a whole. Do you think that that is like an outcome of that system too, the way the
Yeah,
parties are
it's an
going?
outcome of that and technological change. I'd say a lot of it changed with the advent of television, which was within my lifetime, television became a popular medium. And because of the way our uh, we don't have that much public television, it's mostly owned by corporations. So you got to raise a lot of money to get on TV. You know, they used to be able to put people on TV as long as they had what they called the fairness doctrine, where you're supposed to do both sides and that kind of thing. But now the main way to reach voters is not through your local party organization or through your local newspaper's coverage. It's through buying ads on TV.
Yeah.
And that's the trajectory of society has been that people are isolated, watching things on TV or YouTube videos or whatever. They're exposed to commercials, and those commercials cost money to put on. So the people, you look at any political race, who's regarded as a front runner is people who are raising a lot of money.
Most of the time, but I mean, I think we've got a few people right now, like the specific way we're talking about here. Maybe they don't have like it articulated clearly, but they feel it at least, and they
Mm,
see the inauthenticity of the system as it is, and someone that's like, speaks truth to power and is rough around the edges and says no to
yeah.
corporations is very appealing to like your kind of average blue collar working class person, be they conservative or kind of left leaning.
There's definitely an opportunity for that because the people are so angry at both parties now. And I think more people are becoming disillusioned with Trump as an answer to their anger and realizing that it's a bigger problem than they thought. So an outsider becomes very attractive to them.
And that's
But,
what Trump was, though, right? Like in a lot of people's minds, he was the
oh,
outsider. He
right,
was
right.
he's a
Yeah.
billionaire. He can't be paid off by billionaires.
Yeah. And
Right?
he
That
was
wasn't
not a
wrong.
traditional politician. He held no political office, and he was not a like a fervent member of either party. He kind of went back and forth. So people saw him as somebody who's an outsider and could make things happen. But the thing I want to point out about these folks, there are folks that can break through, but it is a real rough road still. And
Yeah.
money helps a lot. And if you got money against you, your road is even rougher.
So are we in full blown oligarchy now? Do we still have functioning institutions, or do we just are we sort of kidding ourselves that we're living in a democracy?
I think we have a few, but they're eroding pretty fast. This last 10 years or so, things have been accelerating. So we see court decisions overturning things that were there for a long time, like voting rights. And we see politicians more and more just doing whatever the heck they want, whether it's legal or not. And it's like people almost accept it as this is the normal way of doing things. If you
Yeah.
if you, if you got power, you don't have to play by the rules. So when people start not believing in rules, well, sometimes there's good reasons for it, but when they really accept that, it becomes chaotic. People are looking for somebody that can hold things together. They usually turn to someone who's more dictatorial. So I'd say we're in a position where we're rapidly moving towards the erosion of any democratic elements in our political system, more towards oligarchy, and the end result of that is going to be some kind of dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean, we're already kind of like authoritarianism light, at least right now, I would say, right? Like,
Depending on who you are, for some people it's light, for some people it's heavy.
well, as a privileged white guy, I would say it's light for me. But I mean, if you're a Hispanic person that has to, worry about ICE picking you up, even if you have all the proper documentation and you're a citizen, like it might not be so light, right?
Well, even remember the two people that were killed in Minnesota who were white people,
True,
middle.
but
Yeah,
that was because they stood up to ICE in those specific moments.
that's it. It depends on how far you push back, whether you become an obstacle to them or not that they want to remove. Yeah, I don't think we're all the way there, and I think there's hope. There's always hope.
So where is the hope? Because I feel pretty hopeless some days. I'll be honest. I have hope, and I keep saying, systems change over time, and this can't last forever. But I'm worried. I have a 3-month-old daughter, a 4-month-old daughter, and I think about what is the world going to look like in 20 years? What world is she going to inherit? And that scares the hell out of me, to be honest.
Mm. Well, it does for me with my grandkids. It would scare me just for my own life if I didn't expect I'm not going to be around all that much longer.
Now,
So, yeah, I think hope is really important these days, and I think you can find it mostly in three places. The first is when you reach out to other people, you do find other people who are thinking along the lines you are, or especially people who are feeling the kind of things you're feeling.
mhm.
Like our conversation right now is gives me hope because here I find somebody else who has some, thought through things and is kind of thinking in the same direction and feeling the same kind of things. And I know if enough people do that and reach out to each other, it's going to move towards some kind of mutual effort to make things change. So that's one thing. Another thing is I look at history and lots of terrible things can happen, but also good things can happen. And often whatever does happen is unexpected. So even though things might look like they're going in a really bad direction or really grim, you never really know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month or a year from now. So that it could be something much better than you expect. I mean, nobody expected Bernie Sanders to come out of nowhere. Nobody expected Donald Trump to come out of nowhere. So things change in ways you can't expect. So when you're trying to mentally block out the future and say, well, this looks like it's going to happen, it ain't going to happen that way. No matter
Yeah.
my viewpoint, your viewpoint, anybody, it's going to be somewhat different. So it could be better. Third way, I believe in God. And I do see in my own life, there are times when I can't see a way forward. And it's just like something moves me in a certain direction. I feel like God does move people. People of good heart, good intentions. I do think there will be some inner resource, whether you want to call it God or not, some kind of divine creative energy of love that moves us in a better direction. I think that's also a source of hope.
Well, on that last piece, I would like to have another conversation about God at some point. That would be great because
All right.
at this point, I don't personally believe in God, but I'm definitely open. I'm always open to having my mind changed.
Maybe we should invite God.
Maybe we should invite God. Maybe he'll show up, or
I've got some questions.
they'll show up. I don't know if God's gendered or not. As far as the, hope in general, though, the biggest issue when it comes to like materially changing things that I see is the organization aspect
Yeah.
of there seems to be plenty of anger and plenty of people feeling similar ways. But like how do you take all of that, like those dispersed people with those dispersed feelings, even if they're kind of the same feelings, and organize that into something powerful? Because I mean, I think of like pretty extreme thoughts, not like violently extreme, but like, what if we just all stop paying taxes? What are they going to really do? Like, they can't arrest everyone. What if we just kind of come together and do this? But like the issue with all of those thoughts is, how do we organize such a thing? How do we, how do we organize such a thing?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I'd be doing better at what I'm trying to do. But I do think the general answer is you just try to figure out the best way forward and you move that way and then you learn from it. You step back and take stock. What have I learned? What was working? What wasn't working? Or what else could I try? And you just keep moving forward. So I think that's the only way to do it. I don't think anyone has a grand master plan
Mm.
that's going to work unless we test it out and we all find some, fruit coming out of it
So the tough work of solidarity and keep plodding forward.
and living your values.
Um,
Imagine the kind of world you want and be the kind of person who would be in that world.
yeah, practice what you preach.
Right.
And that's actually a good segue. So you're kind of trying to work, speaking of organizing, on a political party. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Kind of what
Yeah, I
you're
don't know
working on, what the goals
how
are?
much more you want to go into that in this particular episode, but the idea was to organize around two specific principles. One is the one about workers should control their own businesses, the businesses they work in. And the other one is that property rights have to be limited by the principle that everyone has enough to lead a decent life, whether you got a job or not, because a lot of people are going to be unemployed by AI, and just like technology has always made people unemployed, some people can't work, some people aren't able to work, they got other responsibilities. So everybody has to have enough. That would be the principle. So those two principles and trying to organize around that. I don't see this as a political party that's going to run people for office right away. I see it more as advancing an agenda with whatever opportunities arise. And the first step is just make people aware of that and what it's based on and see who shows up
Hmm.
and talk to people about it and try to get them on board.
Yeah, because we've talked about it before. And I mean, essentially what it boils down to is like some version of extreme, or not extreme, but unionization on a larger scale where workers are actually
Yeah.
controlling, businesses and markets. And then also some form of UBI,
Yes.
right? Essentially is what you're describing. And that seems more pertinent now than ever with AI on the rise.
Right.
I hope that bubble bursts, but I don't know if it will. Because I have absolutely nothing invested in it, and if it tanks tomorrow, I know a lot of people will be hurting.
Yeah.
But I'm scared of the outcome if it doesn't burst, and I
Yeah.
think it's just going to drive. They're going to continue to go away, and it's not to mention all of the more existential issues with AI and the potential scary potentials people are talking about with
Well,
it.
that's how the universal basic income came to the forefront of the conversation as Andrew Yang saw this coming and talked about it in his presidential campaign.
I
So
remember that.
whether that's the answer or not, I do think it is at least one idea worth thinking and talking about as something to organize around.
I agree. So we set out on this, conversation talking about democracy and oligarchy and billionaires. So if you had something in closing to say to whoever's listening to this concerning that general concept, what can the average person do to combat this who feels played by the system, who's been working their entire life and can't seem to get ahead? Like, what can we do while simultaneously feeling the economic pressure? What are practical things that we can do to combat this?
Don't be afraid to talk to people about politics. If a conversation becomes impossible, that's one thing, but don't silence yourself out of fear of what other people will think. So live your values, speak up, and find other people who have similar values, who have similar views, and start talking about how you can take steps to move forward. I would also say if people are interested in the ideas I've raised here, they can go to the website, the Economic Rights Party, and let me know you're interested and sign up for the blog, and we can start getting in contact and talking.
Yeah, and you also have a YouTube channel that you post on regularly. It's the religion, no, the spirituality and
The spiritual and political podcast, which
sorry, I butchered that.
people come to it and they say, well, what is this? Is it this or is it that? But
It's
I
both.
see them as tied together, especially, I mean, it's inevitable now. You see the Christian rights, so much political power they have.
Yeah.
You almost got to talk about the role of religion in politics.
Yeah, I mean, my framework probably views it a little bit more negatively than yours, I would say. But I do see like the general utility and some of the social cohesion that religion has brought to various societies across time. And so I think that piece is worth talking about and engaging with seriously at the very least. And I almost view that separate from the question of whether God exists or whatever. But
Yeah.
religion has certainly brought a lot of people together, just as many, if not more, than it's divided and
Well, I find a lot of value in non-theistic religions
like
like
Buddhism.
Buddhism. Yeah. So it's a way of people coming together and trying to better themselves, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, though, when it comes to what we're facing in this country with the rise of oligarchy and democratic institutions failing us, I think that we're going to have to build a wide coalition. I made a video about culture war versus class war, and I'm much more focused on class war. Not that I want to abandon culture war issues, sticking up for minorities and all those things, especially using, any innate privilege I may have as a white person in doing so. But I mean, we're gonna have to build, in my opinion, a wide coalition with people we might disagree with on like a lot of other stuff if we're going to combat. And I keep using militaristic term. I'm not advocating for like, pulling the muskets off the mantle place or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying necessarily.
Not quite yet.
Not quite yet. We might be getting there, but I'm more talking about just a wide coalition and maybe like mass non-compliance and just making the billionaires and the corporations hurt and hitting them in the pocketbook. I think that would probably have like yield a much better outcome than just like random acts of violence that doesn't seem to do anything but provide the state with reasons to crack down and be more authoritarian. So
Yeah, I think you need to build real relationships with people. based on trust and not on fear.
Well, um, did you have anything else?
I've got plenty else, but I don't think you want to spend all day.
No, I love talking about this kind of stuff and living in deep red conservative Texas. There aren't many people that most of the time it's like an uphill battle just getting past like, wait, you're not conservative. And so
Hmm.
it's nice having a conversation other than that. So
Yeah. You need to practice talking to normal people.
yeah, yeah, essentially it's like yeah, it's rough out here. I won't lie, it's rough out
Uh,
in Texas. Yes,
even in California.
really, is there like a lot of
Oh yeah.
conservatism?
It depends on where you are in California. If you're
Sure.
on the coast, or you're more inland, we may even end up with a Republican governor, but that's a whole nother story.
Fingers crossed against that one. Well, I do appreciate your time, and in the description on this video, I'll link your the website for the
Sure.
Economic Rights Party, and I'll link your YouTube channel
Yeah.
so
And
people can go check you out.
I would encourage anybody who's watching this to leave comments because I'd love to hear your thoughts about what we've talked about.
Absolutely. Yes, I love comments. Comments are great. It's a chance to engage with anybody who happens to see the video. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.